Hello, everyone, and welcome to a brand new episode of the Jams Tea Podcast, where we spin the jams and spill the tea. And this week, we're coming at you with a brand new episode where we talk about the news, the goings-on in the world of music right now, where we talk about what we have all been listening to this week on the channel. We've had a really good week for some nice stuff that we've made. The day we are recording this, Ryley dropped their video on the discography of M83 because we want to prepare for the new M83 album, which, gosh, this is like the first proper M83 album in how many years?
Since Junk in 2016. So
Ooh,
yeah.
Wow. So yeah, go check that out.
Yeah, it was funny, like the whole impetus for doing that video, which I did very spontaneously, was one, we discussed the M83 in last week's Now episode when I talked about the earliest records I owned. And then second, listening to Paranormal so much this week, it's so obvious how strong the influence is of M83 on Paranormal, specifically this new Paranormal record. Like, there's just such a clear through line there. So it's a great time to be someone who really loves that, you know, synthetic shoegaze sound where you have these walls of guitars or walls of distorted synthesizers, these brilliant, beautiful melodies, and this just really emo tinged aesthetic to it all. It's a great time for music like that. Really excited to see what the new M83 album delivers in March. But yeah, go and check out that video. I'm really proud of it. I think it turned into something a little bit more interesting and a little bit more substantial than just a ranking video. So yeah, I'm really proud of that one. And yeah.
Also, we have the return of the Rubber Gum Anime Podcast for real this time. Jen and I brought back the show because we have a mutual appreciation for the anime Bleach, because that is getting a revival anime this year. It is dropping in several different parts, the adaptation of the incredibly beloved final arc, the 1,000-Year Blood War. So we are preparing for covering that, and we have also already begun watching other things to talk about in the future. August is also going to be joining us for some of those things on occasion when he is able to make it. And I guess on the note of more pressing matters is that this little Now episode, we have sometimes we're going to be talking about themes and special topics for these episodes. And this week, pay attention, because we are going to talk about our favorite guilty pleasure songs. We've been looking forward to doing this all week, and it is going to be properly embarrassing. We don't know any of the other person's picks. It is a complete surprise to everyone else. So that should be an interesting little segment at the end of this video.
Yeah, really, really excited for that. That's going to be a fun one. So without further ado, let's get into the latest in music news this week. So there haven't been a lot of particularly notable album announcements or single drops that I want to mention, although obviously we're gearing up for the release of some really significant records in the next few weeks. But I do want to talk about some cool, some funny, some interesting, some noteworthy things that have happened in the world of music this week. I'll start off with the fact that we had the nominees for this year's Rock and Roll Hall of Fame class were announced this week. And just to be clear as well, the nominees are not necessarily the inductees. We'll find out which of these nominees get inducted in May. But I want to mention this because it's a surprisingly based list, like basically across the board. It's really
rare W.
Well, I mean, it's not look, the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame, they're not a serious institution. They kind of just exist as a novelty. But because they exist as a novelty honoring, you know, classic artists essentially from the history of modern popular music, we like a lot of popular music throughout the last 50 to 60 years. So, you know, they are going to accrue W's through our perspective just by virtue of that aligning interest with us. But that said, yeah, this list is really, really awesome. And I'm sad that not all of them will be able to get in this year. We have Missy Elliott, Sheryl Crow, Warren Zevon, who was nominated at the insistence of Billy Joel, who really stuck his neck out to get Warren Zevon on the list.
All right.
Cyndi Lauper, George Michael, Willie Nelson, Joy Division, and New Order as one entry. Those are all first-time nominees, as well as the White Stripes, who, we can't win them all. But anyway, Repeat nominees who still haven't made it in but are nominated yet again this year include Kate Bush, Iron Maiden, Soundgarden, The Spinners, Tribe Called Quest, and Rage Against the Machine. So that's kind of hard to. It's I can't imagine being very mad at many of these.
At this point, I just got a question. It's like, whatever rules you have that are keeping Iron Maiden from being in the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame, maybe you should get rid of those rules.
There's no rules. They're just stupid.
Yeah, the only rule is that the artist's first commercially available recording has to be at least 25 years old, and obviously Iron Maiden clear that. So yeah, it's a bit weird that they're not in there yet. Hopefully this is the year. Certainly as well for some of those. I mean, Kate Bush, Soundgarden, Tribe Called Quest, Rage Against the Machine, they've all been eligible for, coming up on 10 years.
I mean, isn't fucking Eminem in the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame?
I don't know if he would be eligible yet. He might be eligible next year, because I think Slim Shady LP came out in 90. Mind you, Infinite came out in 96. Maybe he is. Is Eminem in the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame?
I wonder if Kate Bush is going to get it just because of the resurgence popularity
Sure
of running
is.
Up That Hill.
As of November of last year.
Oh, there we
Eminem
go.
made it before Kate Bush. Where's my rope?
I love this.
Eminem
I love this little byline from
Iron Maiden.
I love this little byline from this article about his induction. Eminem was inducted Saturday into the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame after performing some of his most popular songs with Steven Tyler and Ed Sheeran. Really telling you the kind of pedigree that Eminem is.
So basically, he performed River and Sing for the Moment. Cool.
Yeah, let's two of his biggest songs, of course.
That's certainly true.
It's not, I
guess.
True. No one remembers those songs except us.
Well, I mean, I guess from a streaming standpoint, they might be. I mean, the Ed Sheeran cut might be one of the more popular cuts on Revival. Like, that charted, didn't it?
Yeah.
Yeah, unfortunately. I don't know how much farther down this thought hole I can go.
Yeah, I mean, like, it's just funny. What was really funny about that to me is the Steven Tyler feature. That's so Rock and Roll Hall of Fame. Like, of course, you get fucking Eris with Frontman in there, but it's doubly funny because I'm pretty sure in the time since then he has been credibly accused of like statutory rape. So, just a great look to be. I know, right? Steven Tyler would never have sex with an underage girl.
A rock star over the age of 50? What?
Anyway, let's
first time I've heard this.
Let's draw a line under that. Another news item that I feel like is worth talking about as well. This was kind of a little minor Twitter thing yesterday. Was the comments of one Mr. Matt Healy on the possibility of an Oasis reunion. This was just so funny.
Another rare W.
Well, this is just like, I to my chagrin, even though obviously my positive feelings on the 1979 are known, I still have probably watched a lot more interviews with Matt Healy than any reasonable, sane, healthy human being would. And so this is the kind of thing that he does just say. But it's nice that it had a little moment on Twitter and it had it inspired a little bit of discussion and debate about, whether or not Oasis are morally and ethically obligated to reunite, which we would say that they are.
Stop modding.
Yeah, stop modding.
Stop modding with your brother.
Modding. I'm Kiwi, right? We've got, big ties to colonial UK. I've never heard the word modding in my life. Never once. Some real fucking letting your grandmother suck eggs or some shit. I'm almost convinced he invented it. But yeah, it was this amazing thing. Like, the longer he went on about it, the more correct he was. It was just so funny when he got to the point of talking about how, like, no one at a High Flying Birds or Liam Gallagher solo gig, not a single human being, wouldn't rather be at an Oasis gig.
And he's just factually correct about this.
Which I said is a better line than he's ever written for a song.
Yeah, that's like...
When is Matt Healy's cultural commentator era? No more 1975. I just want this dude on, like, New Yorker articles.
Yeah, I mean, one of the funny things that he commented on was like, I can forgive them dressing like they're in their 20s.
They're in their 20s.
But stop acting like you're still in your 20s. And so what I like about Matt Healy is that he has a sense of self-awareness about how old is too old to be doing certain things. And so I'm convinced that within 10 years, he will just have a podcast and he'll be like, he'll be like Gen Z Mark Maron, essentially. And he'll just be doing that kind of thing.
Yeah, like it wouldn't surprise me if he like took Zane Lowe's job at some point.
Oh god, that would be so. Yeah, I don't think he could do that because Zane Lowe. The thing about what Zane Lowe does, all respect to him, but you have to be.
He said he's a remarkable kiss ass.
Yeah, I was going to say
yes,
you have to be the world's biggest sycophant to do that job. And if you watch Eddie Zane Lowe interview, he might as well be on all fours slobbering. I don't think Matty Healy could do that. I think if he disliked someone, he wouldn't be able to hold it in.
His interview with the Mars Volta last year is legitimately, I watched like the entire hour-worthy interview of that, which I can't say for most music interviews, but you cannot convince me for his adulation, like, ridden as he was for that band. I'm like, I don't believe that Zane Lowe has ever listened to the Mars Volta in his spare time.
It was somehow more masturbatory than any solo that Cedric or Omar have ever played on record.
It's more masturbatory than us when we talk about the Mars Volta.
Yeah. Anyway.
Although it did bring us that beautiful moment where Omar goes, I would delete this. And Zane goes, that's my favorite fucking line.
That's so good.
I was like, oh my God, they've seen into our brains.
Yeah. So that's yeah. So more 1975 news is welcome in my opinion. Another item this is definitely just more in my wheelhouse since I don't really know if either of you are that familiar with the band that this person is in. But one of my favorite sort of indie rock bands of the 2000s, very New York band, sort of very classic band, is the Walkmen. And the Walkmen's frontman, Hamilton Lighthouser, amazing name, by the way.
I was going to say, holy shit.
Was in the news this week for like the most absolutely random of reasons, completely unrelated to music.
Steamroller ass name.
But yeah, he was in the news because he accidentally received a random person's ashes in the mail. Some funeral home, essentially, there was a mix-up, and apparently this happens, stupidly often, where cremated ashes are sent to the wrong address, essentially. And Hamilton,
that should have to be a pickup only type of thing.
Probably. I think that's a flawed business model.
And so Hamilton was in like local news. This wasn't obviously national news, but he was on ABC. And hilariously, despite the fact that he's the frontman of one of the most commercially successful indie rock bands of the 2000s, him being a musician was not mentioned at all in the ABC piece. He was just local man. Yeah. And so apparently, like, he got these ashes and then he kind of got in touch with the funeral home and he had a whole like thing with them. And he kind of called them out on Twitter and said, these guys are hacks.
Starting beef with a funeral home on Twitter,
and he like posted a snippet of his conversation with this like Juan's funeral home, with the guy from Juan's funeral home, and he was like complaining to this guy. He's like, why on earth would you send these ashes to me? Like, obviously, like, even the address is not even like my name isn't on it. And he's like, the guy from the funeral home's like, well, I don't know, maybe he used to live there, maybe he's dead. And then Hamilton's like, of course he's fucking dead, you just mailed him to me. And that interaction is just one of my favorite things that's ever happened. Just like, and even Hamilton himself pointed this out, it's like an episode of Curb Your Enthusiasm in real life. And just this random, puff piece dovetailing with the world of indie rock is just, that's the funniest thing in the world to me. So yeah. I very much got a kick out of that this week. What else happened this week?
He's dead. You mailed it to me. There's this episode of Frasier. I think it's the Carlos and the Chicken one, where Frasier gets pranked on his own radio show, and Martin's like, "Well, it's cool to hear my son on the radio, at least." And he's like, "I'm on the radio every day."
Oh man, it's just great that that happens in real life. I love it. I live for these completely random, almost like Mad Libs ass news items. So this week, Swedish dance pop star Zara Larsson, who you may have heard of, very famous in Europe and classic sort of third tier of the festival lineup sort of pop artist, was in the news because she wore a dress to an awards show that featured artwork and the logo of the band Burzum.
Oh,
yeah.
No.
And her being, and Burzum are Norwegian, right? And she's Swedish, so it's not quite exactly the same thing, but it's kind of sus, and you should. It's not a good look, and so she was called out for it. And then she had this a statement that I found really funny, where she was like, "Had no idea, just thought my clothes looked cool. It was unfortunate." And so
I suppose it was that.
we can only I was going to say we can only wait and hope for Varg to comment, but no, maybe it's best that he doesn't do that. And
I'm waiting for one of these days for an artist to double down and just be like, free him. And it's like, well, first of all,
no, I just wish she would. I wish she had lent into it, just like, I'm here for the music, Philosophium masterpiece,
Yeah, I was gonna say.
Yeah. But no, she just completely played dumb on it, which I love. I believe she genuinely has no idea who Burzum is and just wore the dress because it looked cool. It's just really funny.
The only people who know who Burzum is are fucking 2 online 15-year-olds, so I can't really begrudge her.
It's just funny, and I feel like whenever someone Scandinavian plays dumb on accidentally invoking anything related to right-wing extremism or Nazism, it's like, how much leeway do you expect to be given here?
How much is too much?
What was the plan? But the idea of Zara Larsson, of all people, dog whistling the alt-right is also really funny. Anyway, that's another funny thing that happened this week. And that's it for funny news. Not that the rest of this news is sad or anything, although some of it is sad. This is a terrible segue, whatever. Also, just announced this week as well is that Elton John's announced a 50th anniversary reissue, remaster, re-release of Honky Chateau, which is very exciting as well. It occurred to me as well that might be the sort of thing that's worth celebrating potentially with some kind of record club at some point when it does.
I adore that album. Would love to do that.
Yeah, so it's going to be available on the 24th of March, limited edition vinyl, and with unreleased material as well. So Elton John fans are going to be eating with the Honky Chateau reissue. We had some kind of sad news, I will say. It's news that's for the best, given how many people we've lost recently and how much we want our older musicians to kind of take care of themselves and not put too much pressure on themselves. Ozzy Osbourne announced that he's retiring this week, and it's kind of sad circumstances as well, because it wasn't really a planned retirement. He is his health has just gone downhill really quickly, unfortunately, and of course he was diagnosed with Parkinson's in 2020. And look, Ozzy is as much of a living legend as he may be the dictionary definition of a living legend at this point in time. Him and Keith Richards, I guess, in the sense that it's amazing that they're still alive in the first place.
I was going to say, it is literally Ozzy, I'm pretty sure, has been on in the double digits amounts of farewell tours at this point.
Ozzy has had a chance to rehearse his own his own epitaph a million times, but it is sad that this has kind of happened to him so suddenly, this change in his well-being, and to the extent that he had to cancel a year-long tour with Judas Priest. So we wish Ozzy all the best as well. We hope Ozzy is able to recoup and recover and stick around long enough to obviously he's probably past his days of even delivering us new music, but we just want Ozzy to be around, because a world without Ozzy
he had an album last year. He's just never stopped.
He had a couple. He's released 2 albums in the last 3 years. You're right. So it's great that I'm glad he's still with us. I'm glad that we still have him as a presence, and we wish him all the best. Last news item second last news item. Last news item is going to be a certain album that Jake's going to be telling us about. But before that, I want to celebrate the anniversary of a record that means a lot to me. Obviously, we're in a constant state of albums that are significant to one or more of us celebrating big momentous anniversaries. We don't always get to dedicate videos to that, and it's fine. I get it. I'm a little bit sad that we couldn't do it for this one, but I also understand why as well. And I'm probably a little bit more fond of this than maybe anyone else would be anyway. But this week, the third My Bloody Valentine album, MBV, turns 10.
Mm-hmm.
And it was a real moment of reflection because, a lot of people most of whom were older than me, because I was like, I was like 15 at the time that that album was released. But, there were a lot of stories that were being shared of the incredible, because that album was surprise released with like basically no fanfare. Kevin Shields had been teasing for, since the mid 2000s that there was going to be a third My Bloody Valentine album, but no one believed him because no one had reason to believe him because he said there would be again and again and again. And then it just existed, on February 3rd, 2013. And I remember it well because for the first week that it was out, I couldn't afford to buy it. I just didn't have money at that time. I was, I wasn't working at that age. I was desperate to hear it. And I remember they put up, and this was in the modern, the kind of like the era between when YouTube was kind of a foreign place for music and for artistic streaming, and the era now where YouTube is kind of like the standard place almost. And so I remember this because when the album came out, My Bloody Valentine uploaded a stream of the album, but like to stop people essentially using the stream as a way of pirating the album and not buying it, they made it really lo-fi, like 360p videos. And it's really funny because it's My Bloody fucking Valentine. But so for like a week, I had rips of those really lo-fi versions of those songs on my iPod Touch, actually. And it was the start of the school year. I would be walking around school listening to this album, just kind of completely caving in my own eardrums, listening to it at insane volume. And it's a really like special memory to me. But like I got to know the album in this really kind of compromised form. So like when I eventually had money for the iTunes download and got to hear it properly, it was like a completely different experience. So yeah, lots of fond memories tied up in that record. I think it's a divisive album. Some My Bloody Valentine fans don't care for it at all. And I love that album. I was chatting about it with our friend Zach as well, who also has really fond feelings about it too. It's a really special record. It's I don't know if we'll ever get a fourth My Bloody Valentine album. Considering the 22-year gap between Loveless and MBV, I wouldn't rule anything out.
Well, they've been talking about it like they did with MBV. It's the same shit again, how they're just like, oh, we have 2 new albums.
Yeah.
Do you, Kevin?
Well, I mean, yeah, it's the same fucking shit. It's the exact same shit we're going through with the fucking Cure at the moment, except that's even more of a cock tease because that music does genuinely seem to exist.
It exists. Give it to me, Robert.
Why would you show it to me if I can't have it? All we're saying is we understand and are sympathetic to the artistic process and also the demands of record labels and that sort of thing. That said, release your fucking music. I'm tired of waiting. On the opposite note, in terms of bands that need to stop releasing music, we had yet another emission from the Smashing Pumpkins this week. The second installment in their new trilogy, a trilogy which is itself the third installment in another trilogy consisting of Melancholy and the Infinite Sadness and Machina. Atum, Part 2 dropped this week. Jake, you're the only one of us who has any kind of, will to listen to any of this shit. So tell us about it. How does it compare to Atum Part 1? And what is the shape that this trilogy is taking at this point in your estimation?
It's so funny that like the moment Atum Part 1 came out and dropped, like I got a little notification and like immediately I was like, yes, I have to do it. And I listened to it as soon as I got it because I was at work. I was already listening to music and I was like, all right, might as well do this. And I talked about it on here on an episode with Jen last year, late into the year. And my thoughts on that constituted, this is certainly better than Sear, but not by much. And I think the most disappointing thing about Atom Act 2 is that it's the same shit all over again. It's this same kind of dream pop, synth pop, alt rock kind of mishmash together that, yeah, it sounds better than Sear. Like that's the one thing I keep coming back to, is that from a production standpoint, the mixing on here is still kind of terrible, but it has more presence. Like the synths have more impact and weight. Like these songs actually feel like they have a tangible effect on you while listening to them, other than like mind-melting boredom. And that also has to do with the fact that, sure, I've been listening to these, segments of the album, these, chapters, the singular album releases, which certainly helps me digest them a little bit better. So I am thankful for the release format of that. But I'd say that Atum Act 2 is the ever, like, if I'm comparing the two parts, it is like the minimum amount that something can be considered better than something else. This is better than the first one. And I mean that by like I've started rating things on Rate Your Music out of 100. Atum Act 1, I have at a 32. This is a 33. Haha, Smashing Pumpkins joke. But like it is incrementally an improvement because it doesn't have as many consistent low points. Like I did admittedly kind of miss the complete train wreck of something like Hooray, which I believed I described as Numa Nightcore on the last episode. There's nothing on Act 2 that's that bad, which is almost kind of disappointing. Like it gets close with I think the universally agreed weak points of songs like Loss and Night Waves, where the songs just sort of go in between like heavy fucking alt rock riffage, bro, and just like the most boring dream pop you've ever fucking heard, with Billy Corgan just being like, that's the whole vocal presence across the whole album, and it ends as limped dickly as those songs with the culling and spring times. But even then, the low points aren't cool just moment. as yeah, they're not as like, awe-inspiringly terrible. They're not up there with like Zeitgeist as some of the worst things this band have ever done. And then there's the best song on here, which I feel like I'm obligated to give like at least one of these tracks on these listens like the slight like 3 out of 5 star vaguely positive feeling like rating, because there's always one song on these that basically epitomizes all of Billy Corgan's best tendencies at this point in his career, and it just only gets over the finish line. Like, it's not even that, like, I enjoyed this or even think it's particularly good. It's just that the song manages to finish the race that the rest of the album fucking falls on its face while it's still running, and that being Space Age, which is so close to being, like, a genuinely good, modern sort of reinterpolation of the ideas that they had on Siamese Dream, and it's just mixed so fucking terribly. Billy, for the love of God, get anybody other than who you have been getting to produce these songs and this album to work on this shit, because it's not working. Please, God, it's so obvious. If my amateur ass can be like, no, this is incompetent, then you need to stop. You need to get someone other than your big, shiny, ego bald head to do the work for you. I'm just
get someone else to make the album.
Yes. So I don't know. At this point, fucking anything. So hire a ghostwriter.
Just stop.
I mean, this is the thing. We're talking to someone who is, and this is one of the things that made him great, and the thing that makes him cursed to this, this eternal fate of mediocrity is that he is, he's a megalomaniac. He's a fucking egomaniac. He's completely singularly focused on his own vision. That's the thing that made him great, and that's the thing that makes him suck now. And that's the eternal curse of a lot of great artists. and it's kind of part of the package deal. Like, you need that kind of single-minded, even selfish, self-confidence when you're in that, peak creative era of your life, when all those ideas are just falling out of you. You need to have that confidence to be able to execute them to a degree that makes them feel, believable and sincere and real. And that's the aspect of that music that in the 90s that made it so appealing. Because if it ever felt like Billy Corgan was in any way pretending, it wouldn't have worked as well. But yeah, and that's just, once the well dries up, as it, in 95% of cases, it just does, then this is what we're left with. Atum.
It's just so tantalizing, because it shows me that, the well is mostly dry, but it's not fully dry, because like, I feel like the Billy Corgan of even 15 years ago would have made a song like Space Age be genuinely great. And instead, we're stuck here, and it's just like reminding you just enough of the fact that this band isn't like, they're like 99% washed. But that 1%, man, is fucking infuriating.
Yeah, as for like late career Billy, and I know this is, I liked Monuments to an Elegy. I recognize a lot of people hate that.
I think that's okay.
I thought that one was decent, and that is a lot of what you're describing, is it? Because that's primarily kind of synth based with some guitar stuff laid in. But I think of songs like Being Beige and stuff, and I was like, this is kind of cute, and I dig it. And it's kind of like he has forgotten how to make even that idea of, this sort of sparkly, chintzy, cheesy synth pop song just sound listenable. So that's the most frustrating thing, is that even if he just kept writing these same songs and putting these same songs on his record, they would be so much better if even the tiniest amount of care was put into how they're presented, as was, 10 years ago.
I feel the need to also, I feel the need to add to the fact that I'm not even accounting for the fact that this is still supposed to be one album. I'm judging these as they come out as their own singular album experiences. I'm not even accounting for the fact that these all sound the same, and that if you combine them all into this triple album, it would be impossible to sit through. We would never review this whole thing on the show, because it would be miserable. It would be like, you wouldn't even enjoy listening to it. We wouldn't even be entertaining. We would just be sitting there like,
I still think like it would be fun to do something like the Machine albums, maybe, just because there's a little bit more to dig into there, and a good mixture of stuff.
Fuck, man, I'd talk about Zeitgeist at this point.
Don't say that.
I mean it.
If we do what we're doing with artists like, Tom Waits or whoever, where we just eventually just do the discography through eventual record club after record club, I wouldn't mind that, but Zeitgeist would be one of the last ones we would do.
There's just so many things that we could do instead of that.
Yeah, no, that's right, Morgan. You've hit the nail on the head.
The world of music is so infinite and vast. Why would we spend our time with that?
Before we get into what we've been listening to kind of wipe the slate on that and just kind of bring up the tempo and the pace and the mindset to something much, much more pleasant. Morgan, I'm going to call upon you. I know you went and saw a certain Mr. Isbell live in concert recently. Do you want to tell us a little bit about what that experience was like and what the show was like? Yeah.
Me and my parents have seen Jason Isbell in the 400 unit. It's anywhere between 6 and 10 times now.
Wow.
I've not been there for all of those, but I think I'm at around 6 or 7. And that was, once or twice a year event type of thing for us. And it went from that to no times a year for about 3 years. Finally getting to hear songs from reunions live. Just over the moon. Really interesting things happened where in these live settings, like it kind of feels like they weren't able to play shows for 3 years when they start playing, even though they've been back on the road for some time now. there are moments in almost every song where they just let it breathe for a bit and somebody will jam over top of something. There's a bass solo in What Have I Done to Help that, I mean, just buttered my biscuits.
Yeah, I mean, like you sent us a clip, and it was like Isbell was on some fucking like Larry Carlton, Steve Lukather, like Eric Clapton type shit,
Mm-hmm.
just completely shredding. And I was not expecting, when you send a clip of Isbell live in concert, I was not expecting to see him doing that. It was almost like, right? Yeah, I mentioned like Steve Lukather and like Larry Carlton stuff. It
Mark
felt like
Knopfler.
a kind of yeah. Mark Knopfler, another great reference point. It felt like like a 70s soft rock show, with like those really technical guitar solos you get in bands like Steely Dan and Dire Straits and and that kind of thing as well. It was a really nice sort of surprise, and I couldn't see much of the scene, but like you could tell from the video the vibe of just people just kind of like standing there, like taking it in, and just kind of like that really sort of like adult standing or sitting, the adult sort of sitting concert thing where you're just kind of like sitting there at a rock show you don't do very much anymore. It was really cool to see, and I was not expecting that whole vibe at all.
Yeah, I mean they're a fucking band,
Yeah.
like just as a cohesive unit. There's not many guitar duos I like more than Isbell and Sadler Vaden, guys who have been playing with each other for more than a decade now and are just in complete harmony.
I love when guys play with each other.
You're so fuck you.
No, great. Yeah.
I always love when you try to dial back from some out of pocket shit you just said, and you're like, "Nice, you're right. Good job."
No, it's just awesome. It's great to see so much energy and because when I listen to Isbell, usually I'm just putting on some really sad shit from like Southeast.
Yeah, and I mean,
something more than three, and I forget
there
how
are those there are those moments too before they ended with Decoration Day, which is what that solo was from.
Oh,
They played Speed Trap Town, and about halfway through the show, they played Elephant, and it was just Isbell and his keyboard player, Derry DeBorah, and I left spiritually for a few moments.
All right, well, let's get into what we've been listening to as well. Jake, what are some of the highlights from the last couple of weeks that you have been listening to that you want to shout out?
On the end of the spectrum that involves a lot of listening to things, in preparation for this week's episode, pretty much over the entirety of January, I just sort of went about listening to basically every project under the banner of Longinus Records, which, longtime viewers know that is Parannoul's record label, but also Sonhos Tomam Kanta, also Asian Glow, also Delazir. Basically just the really cool, innovative, cutting edge kind of label that has to do with all of these sort of shoegaze, emo adjacent projects that basically we've been flying the flag for ever since Parannoul. And I just wanted to catch up with all of them in terms of EPs, in terms of albums and all that. And I wanted to rank them and see which one is my favorites. And I went back and explored some things that I've already listened to, like Asian Glow's album Cull Fickle, Sonhos Tomam Kanta's Hypnagogia, the Parannoul EP that we talked about, White Ceiling, Black Dots Wandering Around. I also checked out the first album from Parannoul, the 2020 record, Let's Walk Along the Path of a Blue Cat. And I know that because like they really caught on with To See the Next Part of the Dream, that kind of overshadowed anything they had done before. And the thing about Parannoul is that he actually was making records under the name Last Star before Parannoul for like years and years. Like he has like 15 albums under that project's name, and I haven't gotten around to those yet, but they're a little bit more like dreamier, post-rocky kind of stuff. I've listened to some of them. Eventually some of those songs were turned into Parannoul songs later on, so if you want to see like them in their nascent stage, That I do recommend listening to if you're like a big super fan like we are. And don't skip out on stuff like Let's Walk Along the Path of a Blue Cat. In fact, if you were somebody who found yourself at a bit of a distance from To See the Last Part of the Dream because of the very intense, very oppressive production style, I think that this lets you onto many of the strengths of Parannoul as an artist without that very abrasive production. It is still very, electronic oriented. It contains a lot of what makes him him. It's not as developed as the ideas on that next album, but I still think that it doesn't deserve to be overlooked. And I did, of course, listen to project from, I think, the only artist we've never talked about that belongs to Longinus, which is Delazir, who is a kind of South Korean blend of shoegaze, dream pop, post-rock, folktronica kind of thing. They have an album and an EP. And the album that I listened to from them, Vitamins and Apprehension, I enjoyed, but it is definitely feels like a proof of concept for something. It's on the shorter side. It's less than 40 minutes, but it still feels like they're trying to figure out their sound, especially after you listen to their EP, Nebulous You, which is fucking amazing. This is a project that I recommend in the same stead that I recommend To See the Next Part of the Dream, in that, yes, this has a particular style of production that is going to alienate many people, especially on the first track, Constellation Song. That is where this sort of really heavily oppressive, almost like, it's like Parannoul by way of chamber music, except it's really smothered in this first part of it, and it got me off on the wrong foot with it, I think. But after that, the 3 songs that follow it, that are all like the bulk of this record, really, which is funny that this record is longer than their proper album by like a minute, but these songs are fucking incredible. Like, this is some of the best stuff this label has put out, period. Specifically Concerto and What Orpheus Sang Before. These 2 songs are incandescently beautiful bits of dreamy post-rock that is also blended with a kind of psychedelic folk that I don't feel like any of the other people on the label have explored in like much detail in their music, that makes this really worth checking out. I would say that this is the biggest surprise for me. I would say that in terms of my rankings, that makes it into like my top 5 projects from this band. And of course, I revisited Downfall of Neon Youth, terrific record. Revisited To See the Next Part of the Dream, which I do want to establish a bit of a precedent before we talk about the new Parannoul today, because I feel like perhaps maybe this is, I have to clarify here, this is still an album that I love a whole lot. Still one of the better albums I heard in 2021. That said, this has grown off of me ever so slightly, and a lot of it does have to do with the production, which is frustrating because I wouldn't want it produced any other way, because I think it finds strength in how it sounds, but it does lead to a kind of sonic monotony that I feel like can occasionally overwhelm the experience and kind of encroach over the singular strengths of how greatly composed all of these things are, and just occasionally feel like it sort of sands off the unique edges of how fundamentally great I think Parannoul is. I still love this album, really enjoy listening to it, but it definitely feels like it sets the stage for something perhaps more adventurous down the pipeline. And the only other thing I'll mention in terms of projects from this is that the only other thing I hadn't heard from them is the side project of Sonhos Tomam Kanta, which is the project Moon Daughter, which put out an album last year called Phosphenes and Iridescent Lights. And I am heartbroken I did not get to mention this album last year, because this is easily one of the best albums of last year, if you ask me, right alongside Maladaptive Daydream, which, like, I think that Maladaptive Daydreaming and Phosphenes, those are, at least like of what I've heard from them, those are my 2 favorite projects this label has put out. Phosphenes and Iridescent Lights, though, is very different from Maladaptive Daydreaming. This is basically, if the idea of Sonos Tomam Kanta just doubling down and making a Cocteau Twins album sounds interesting to you, here you go, because that's exactly what this project is. It leans a little bit more into slowcore, a little bit more into, like, you can feel the influence of stuff like Vaporwave on this. It is a very sedentary, very ambient pop leaning project. So this is not, it doesn't give you the immediacy of a lot of stuff like, you know, Parannoul does, or even Maladaptive Daydreaming with its very aggressive black gaze. This is not that. But if you've listened to some of their projects in the past, they have really compelling moments where they just sort of pare everything back, and they'll go into the more ambient parts of their sound. They'll go into the more stripped back, the more dreamy, the more just kind of psychedelic moments. And this is an album made up of nothing but that. And I adore it. It's absolutely gorgeous. I have not been able to stop listening to it. Just whenever I have felt a little bit stressed out this month, a little bit overwhelmed, putting this on is a total balm to the senses. Especially songs like Endless Sea of Nothingness and Lonely People Neon Cities, the final track on here. Absolutely gorgeous stuff. This kind of flew under the radar for most people. It's one of the lesser sort of like popular, like least listened to projects that I've talked about. I highly recommend it. Even if you're someone who hasn't gotten along with Sonos Tomam Kanta's other stuff, this is very, very different than it. But it definitely makes me even more excited for the potential of both of these projects individually. And because it just makes me excited because Sonos Tomam Kanta is this incredibly versatile artist. I think that I would have to say they're my favorite person on the label so far, just because of that versatility. So that was a particularly rewarding experience. I know that not everyone in the world has the time to listen to all of these, but I highly recommend that you do so, especially the stuff that not a lot of people have listened to, because honestly, all of it's worth it. Even though Dream Glow is my least favorite of all of them, I can still say that those have some incredible fucking highs. So please, for the love of God, if you haven't caught up and you're like looking forward to the new Parannoul, or if you're really into the new Parannoul and you want more shit like that, no better time than the present, man. Go after it.
If you have the time to listen to us talk about this stuff, you definitely have the time to listen to these records. I have not heard the Moondaughter record in full, but I have heard the song When I Fall Asleep, which I liked very much. It reminded me a lot of Grouper, actually. So I think if people out there
for fans of Grouper, absolutely.
Because it's like that fusion of, you know, sort of droning ambient soundscapes that have a lot of kind of depth and density to them, but also with that those light freckled touches of like folk influence and instrumentation that come through in that as well. So yeah, I think that's, I know I definitely will listen to the album in full because I did like that song a lot. And it was, I have a bit of a like, I like Lua, that's her real name, I believe. Lua Viana's music is really fascinating and really beautiful. I love the 3 songs that she contributed to Downfall of the Neon Youth. Those songs were just amazingly potent and powerful pieces of black gaze. Some of the music they've done since. I also really like the album's Hypnagogia, by the way. That album, that album really resonated with me in 2021 because, again, after Parannoul, it was one of the next things I heard from any artist, you know, from this scene, and it really just landed with me. But some of the other music that Lua has made hasn't really been for me as much, and it's often a product, I think, of just the way that it's presented in terms of the density of the arrangements and the particular production style that she chooses sometimes. But the music is very, very good, and I will always be there day one for any major releases from her. So yeah, as anyone who knows this podcast knows, we're going to keep following these artists very closely with each release that they put out. Jake, anything else you want to talk about?
Yes. One thing that is not a part of the scene that we've talked about, but is tangentially related to it just because it feels like it should be, that being that I have discovered a new Japanese band that I really, really like, called, good name, My Dead Girlfriend, which is, I mean,
I made
a
joke about this band like needing to collaborate with World's End Girlfriend, I think.
Yeah. Look, I'm not saying that would slap my titties, but it probably would. so I'm open to the idea. But I listened to the EPs and album. I believe they have 2 albums. One of them is a collaborative album and one is just an album they've made. And for all I know, they are still working. The last thing they did was a score for a movie, but they are still an active band. But the EPs that I listened to are great. The one I listened to is called Shaman's Daughter. I think that's their most recent proper release in 2020, which was a good EP. But their 2012 EP, Underdrawing for 3 Forms of Unhappiness at the State of Existence, I'm really just burrowing into a parody of myself with these names, is amazing. But it's their proper album, Hades, parenthetical, the 9 stages of change at the deceased remains, but I'm just going to call it Hades.
What is this? Co-eating Cambria? Get the fuck out of here.
That makes me feel a little bit better, knowing that we enjoy bands with these absolutely up their own ass titles.
Oh, it's amazing. I fucking love it.
What's the deal with Claudio Sanchez? Am I right, fellas?
I must say, if you are into stuff like the Longinus record stuff, particularly Paranormal, you have to listen to Hades. This album been on pretty constant rotation for me ever since I listened to it. It's stellar. It's a combination of sort of dream pop, shoegaze, and noise pop, and it has a really abrasive style of mixing, but it's more like, I think the way I describe this is Paranormal by way of Always. This is like Blue Rev with the sonic palette of the new Paranormal album. All of these songs are like, they're constructed in such a way that makes you feel like they're getting the sort of maximal amount of the ingredients of pop music, like Always. It's a stellar like initial run of tracks. I mean, it never really drops the ball, but man, this album really, really just gets a lot out of its sonic palette. It's really hard hitting. It's not particularly long. I think it's like 48 minutes, but this is something that, like, again, it fits right in with the sonic aesthetic of that stuff. And I highly recommend it, just because it doesn't seem to be something that like everybody is aware of or has listened to or what have you. But nonetheless, if you need something like that to sort of scratch that itch, something really immediate sounding, if you're into Always, if you're into Paranormal, please give this a shot. And the last thing I want to mention is Quicker, just because it is related to something we talked about last year. That being, I said I was going to do it quicker, but I guess time just got away from me. But I finally listened to my next album from Fiona Apple, after we listened to Win the Pawn on our record club last year, which coincidentally, if you haven't seen that record club, go check that out. That's a really good record club. I didn't really know like what I was going to do next. I was like, I could go to her first album. I could go to Extraordinary Machine. I could revisit Fetch the Bolt Cutters now that I have a bit more of an understanding of her as an artist. But instead, I went to the Idler Wheel. Just because that one seemed to be like, because
it's a literal hate crime that you hadn't heard it already.
That's probably the best reason. I think
but it's like a hate crime against yourself for not having heard it already.
And I mean, I'm not saying that you're right.
Nothing new for us.
But you're right. If you remember what our thoughts were on that album,
it's just Fiona Apple going, "You're gonna cry, faggot," for 40 minutes.
And I did. That's the thing,
I mean,
though.
the answer is yes.
and I re-listened to Win the Pawn as well, which I gave that album a tentative 9.5 because I was just like, not sure how this will grow. It's a 10. So, it's a 10. It's a 10. It's a perfect album. But the thing about the Idler Wheel is that this bitch made an album that's just as good as Win the Pawn again. How? And of course, it has the long-ass title. The Idler Wheel is wiser than the driver of the screw, and whipping cords will serve you more than ropes will ever do. Shorter than Win the Pawn, and kind of catchier.
Yeah, it's actually a legitimately heat album title.
Oh yeah, and it implies it sort of has that sort of poetic meter that a lot of her lyricism has, and boy howdy, does her lyrical content on this album put you through the ringer. songs like, I mean, fuck's sake, Left Alone, Werewolf, Periphery, Valentine, Daredevil. Shit, man. What was she cooking? This is an album where it departs slightly from the kind of jazzier, kind of Baroque elements of When the Pawn sound, and this is a rougher, warmer kind of it feels like the production of this album is building an environment as much as it is building a song. There's like found sound and environmental noises that just kind of infiltrate these songs at various moments that make this album have a very kind of like metropolitan feel to it. Like you feel like you're living in the city with Fiona as you are listening to it, and she's just sort of guiding you through it on songs like Valentine or Jonathan or Left Alone, or just basically taking you through the things that keep her up at night, like on the intro Every Single Night. And oh man, this is a quintessential sad bitch album. I know we tried to sort of stay away from stereotyping Fiona's music into being sad girl stuff in our initial review, which is true, she shouldn't be. That said, this is an even better breakup album than When the Pawn was, which I think When the Pawn fits that purpose pretty well, but this really does feel like trying to pick yourself up, dust yourself off, and try to continue throughout life despite being just like horrifically emotionally wounded by somebody. Songs like Regret or Hot Knife, for instance, I feel like really display stuff like this.
It's kind of an album about like self-imposed isolation as a means to heal yourself, like deliberately cutting yourself off from people and the rest of the world so that you can
very
heal.
Laura Marling again. That was a comparison I came back to a lot.
And it's like one of the things I love about it is that it gets you into this sort of self-imposed isolation space sonically really well by the way that it's recorded. So it has this real live feel to it. I think a lot of the piano parts and vocal parts are recorded live. And of course, you do have overdubs on most of the songs, of course, because it's not a purely live record, but it just creates that feeling. And like you said, she uses a lot of like, not necessarily found sound, but it's kind of like unconventional means of percussion. Like on Periphery, she has this loop of her kind of sort of scratching her shoes along pavement. And then, of course, Regret has the gear shift that's stuck as the main loop. And you have all these sorts of things. You have music box type melodies, all that kind of stuff. You have this utterly devastating sample of like screaming children at the end of Werewolf. Just this crazy stuff that she does that really gives it a sense of this kind of isolated loneliness. It reminds me a lot of, I mentioned this as well when we were talking about it in the group chat. It reminds me a lot of Vespertine by Björk.
Yes.
Emotionally is like the entire opposite of it, because that's about finding intimacy and connection and, romance with someone else and bonding through that. But just in terms of aesthetics and techniques, it's a similar album in terms of the way that it uses sounds and mixes and just really unconventional pieces of instrumentation to enhance a really intimate feel. But I also just like the arc of Idler Wheel a lot as well, because it is this really dark record and it goes to these really self-loathing and bitter and caustic places, but it finds a kind of resolution. It takes that to its most kind of cathartic extent with songs like Left Alone and Regret. And then at the very final stretch with Anything We Want and Hot Knife, it merges out the other side of that and ends in a surprisingly optimistic place about kind of embracing the possibilities of new love and the possibilities of excitement. Like the way that she sings, "He excites me" on Hot Knife is like one of my favorite vocal deliveries she's ever done. It's just so raw and real. Okay. Well, I'll get into a few things now that I want to shout out. I want to start with a new release that look, I'll be honest, it didn't completely blow me away, but I really appreciated it. In fact, it's doing a lot of things that I think have the potential to really appeal to certain people. Jake, I think you may even be one of them. It's currently, it's a very, we talk about a lot of rate your music core on this podcast. We try not to lean into the stereotype too much, but inevitably we just do talk about music.
It's the best way to discover new music.
Yeah, and we do end up talking about and commentating a lot of the culture of that website as well. But so an artist that is currently on the number 3 spot on the year-end chart for this year is an artist by the name of Panda Rosa. Now, this is an artist I'd heard of before because I have mutuals and friends who are huge fans, online friends, obviously, who are huge fans of this particular artist. And they are known for these, kind of experimental, psychedelic, droney soundscape sort of albums that they've made, several of them over the past, 7 years. But this new record that they've put out called Burned Car Highway Light Volcanic is probably the release of theirs that's gathered the most steam.
Volcanic Bird Enemy and the Voice Concern? What?
Yeah. It's a demanding release. It is 2 hours long. And so I was like, man, am I really going to listen to this? And then I thought to myself, shit, I listened to like multiple Natural Snow Buildings albums.
Yeah, me too.
I have no excuse for not listening to this. And so I put it on. I listened to it in full yesterday at work. And, I couldn't help but make a Natural Snow Buildings comparison at certain points because it's very much its own thing, but in the way that it uses longer lengths and droning textures as well, it evokes that sort of thing. But it's kind of like, I don't know, it's different. It's drone music in a sense, but it's like very busy and cluttered and just full of like layers and layers and layers of sounds. There's a huge plunderphonics element to it as well. So a lot of it is sampling from other music. There's a really random Modest Mouse Truckers Atlas sample at one point. There's a sample from Orbital's Insides that I picked up at one point on this record. There's just all kinds of like really interesting bits of sort of plunderphonic sampling on this. And I haven't dug a lot into Panda Rose's artistic identity and what the purpose of their music is to them. But what I can gather is that records like this are kind of made to kind of induce this sort of state of almost like meditative zoning in. Like you just get completely lost in these massive soundscapes. There's not a lot of real, there's definitely melodies and music, weaving its way through these records in certain places, but a lot of it is just about this wall of sound. Gorgeous, psychedelic, very pretty, very beautiful, but so dense. And the purpose of it, I think, is just to kind of completely just bury you in that and kind of let you just sort of exist in that space. I can't deny that I think it would have had more of a connection and a sort of lasting impact for me if it had been like an hour shorter. But at the same time, I get that part of its purpose is to sort of be this overwhelming wall that just kind of bears down on you and you just sort of like are flattened by it. And it's not, I say that, it's not like particularly loud or abrasive in any way. It's not really abrasive at all, actually. It's just like, it's this massive cloud of sounds for 2 hours. And I found it really beguiling. I found it really intriguing. There are moments like Cutting All My Wires, Mortal End Love, The Brain Misfolds, the title track, Through. There's definitely lots of moments on this record that I found to be individually quite stunning. It's just a lot to take in, and you have to really have a preponderance for what the kind of music I'm describing if you're going to engage with this at all. But I say if it intrigues you, definitely give it a shot. It is super Rate Your Music core. Like there's just a lot of influence from lots of very Rate Your Music-esque acts, like you made a Volcanic Bird Enemy joke about the title, and I think some of Lil Ugly Mane's sort of psychedelic non-hip-hop music is actually not all that uncomparable. I also thought of even artists like Sweet Trip to a certain extent, just that kind of digital dreamy bliss element does weave its way through this in certain ways. So yeah, I recommend giving it a shot, but just know that it's not going to be for everyone. But I think, Jake, you might have a good chance of enjoying it, or certainly more than me anyway. I appreciated more than enjoyed it, but I'm glad that this artist is having a certain level of success crossing over a little bit online in that space. Nifty. And it's just worth hearing to see if you can, how many of the random ass plunderphonic samples you can pick up on. Like there's lots of like
Modest Mouse. Damn.
It's not even like a sample that's used musically. It's like randomly in the middle of this wall of sound, Truckers Atlas just starts playing for 30 seconds. It's so random.
I mean, good song. So,
but no, the sample, the orbital sample of the song "The Box" from Insides is actually used in a way where it forms the foundation of the song. I think it's the song "Mortal End Love." I really liked that way that it was used. So yeah, good album. Definitely check it out. You might enjoy it more than me. Last thing I'll talk about is the biggest surprise discovery of the last couple of weeks for me, in the sense that I listened to this album on a whim based on a Rick Beato video, but also because I had heard good things about this album, even though this particular artist, I think in the current cultural consciousness, people kind of write him off as this very cheesy, almost like Michael Bolton-esque figure, even though he's, always had a little bit more credibility and just coolness than Michael Bolton, but still has kind of, I think, been consigned to the pile of kind of like gooey 90s new age shit. That means people kind of forget about him and forget about how good his music was. And the artist I'm talking about is one Seal. Seal, the man, the myth, the legend, who had an absolute breakout in 1994 with his second self-titled album, produced by the legendary Thomas Dolby, including the massive hit single Kiss from a Rose. And, my discovery of this and realization of how awesome this album is feels very much of a piece with Jake and I's recent kind of discovery of how cool Sade actually are, because it's a similar kind of thing where it's like an artist you just assume is like it's just wallpaper music for wine mums or whatever. And then you listen to the record and you realize, fuck me, this is a technical masterclass. And that's what Seal's second album is. And I was like, when I started listening to it, I was like, damn, this is actually like really gorgeous and really well produced. And these songs have really great hooks. 2 or 3 songs in, I was like, I was not expecting it to maintain that level of excellence the entire album, and it just does. And at the point where Kiss from a Rose hits, you're kind of just on this high that the album is kind of consistently built, and that song in context just feels like the greatest fucking song you ever heard when you listen to it. A thing I never thought I would say about Kiss from a Rose, because I've worked in supermarkets and stores where that song is distantly played over PRs and made me want to kill myself. But when you actually listen to this fucking song, this shit is fucking great. It's just so good. It's powerful.
The credits for this album, Jeff Beck is on this album?
Oh, dude.
What?
The manpower on this thing is unreal. And what's great about it is it's not just, Seal is being lifted up by these great session musicians and producers. Seal is the star of the show the entire time, and there is not a single song where he is giving anything less than a fucking 10 in terms of his effort, his commitment, even his songwriting, which can be cheesy at certain points. But man, on tracks like Prayer for the Dying, on tracks like Don't Cry, on tracks like If I Could.
Mitchell, what the fuck?
This shit is insane. It is a classic. It is a front to back great album. And it's not even just like my expectations set this up to be so much better. I listened to it a second time. I was like, nah, this is fucking candy. This is candy. This is pure visionary mastery and deserves to be a high level Pantheon album. Look, maybe I'm just getting old. Maybe I'm just like growing up and starting to be in my adult contemporary shit. But this is just, it's like it's a full course meal of an album. You are getting your vegetables, you're getting a properly just beautiful juicy medium rare steak, you're getting the best baked potatoes you've ever had, you're getting a glass of port that feels like having sex for the first time when you drink it. You're getting everything with this album. So yeah, that I build my segment up to Seal's second self-titled album because it is kind of low-key a masterpiece, and actually genuinely has me curious to check out more of Seal's music. Even if he very much does belong to a particular era and point in time in the 90s, where the particular like style of pop soul that he was trading in was really, really big. I don't know, to me, lumping him in with artists like, Celine Dion, who does have some great music, and Michael Bolton, who, doesn't, still feels so like just missing the point and kind of really overlooking so much about Seal's actual passion for great musical construction, production, and how to build an awesome album. So yeah, Seal, but the second Seal, I haven't heard the first Seal. The second Seal, though,
I'm pretty fond of the seventh myself.
This is Seal's albums in order. Seal, Seal, human being, as in not an animal anymore, I guess. Seal 4, system, soul, commitment, soul 2, 7, which is his
If
ninth
Soul
album.
is so good, how come there's not a Soul 2?
I don't know. I just think that Seal's whole deal, before this, the only real impression I had of
could
Seal,
say he sealed the deal.
before this, my only real impression I had of Seal was his hilarious cameo in Popstar. And now I just have respect for him on an entirely different level.
I almost forgot about that.
I have respect for Seal on an entirely new level now. And Kiss from a Rose has done this amazing thing of swinging from a song that legitimately makes me want to kill myself because I hate it so much to a song that legitimately makes me want to kill myself because it's so beautiful. Just from like growing up and properly listening to that shit. So yeah, that's what I've been listening to. All right. Without further ado, let's get into the main part of today's episode. We are going to be talking about, have you each got 3? I've got 3. I've got 3. All right. So we're each going to talk about 3 guilty pleasure songs that, look, the assignment was a little bit vague. You can interpret guilty pleasure in any way you want. I know it's a loaded phrase that not a lot of people like, but we're not taking it super serious. We're not obviously shaming. We can shame each other because we are, because we do that, but we're not shaming. We're not shaming anyone out there for enjoying whatever they enjoy. That's not the point of this. It's just like, there is music you enjoy that you feel a certain level of cultural embarrassment for enjoying. And if you don't, then you're made of stronger stuff than us 3. Certainly my picks do make me feel a certain level of shame.
I think that was the litmus test for us, is that we were just like, what are not necessarily like the 3 songs that we feel guilty for enjoying. It's what is the most embarrassing songs that we could possibly pick for this exercise.
Absolutely. And I definitely wanted to like avoid having picks that wouldn't surprise you either because you'd already known about them or because I've already talked about them before. Like, for instance, a prime candidate for me would be Ghost's 20s, but you all know that I kind of low-key like that song. So there's no point in me dropping that in this segment as a thing because it's not going to get much of a reaction. So I have 3 songs that you may or may not be surprised to hear that. And again, I don't know. I think I would say I love all of these, or at least really like them. It's hard to say. There's definitely a certain extent to which I acknowledge with these picks that, none of these are fucking God only knows or anything like that, but they are songs I enjoy. So how we can do this is that we'll take turns. We'll go one at a time, round in circles, each do our first pick as well. And we can queue it up on YouTube and have a little quick reminisce or introduction, as the case may be. Jake, why don't you go first with your first pick for a guilty pleasure song that you're kind of low-key a little bit embarrassed to like?
All right, so I had a plethora of things to choose from because, the earliest phase of my musical development included lots of music. I mean, like the Toby Mac Record Club, I think, is a perfect embodiment of the music that I was exposed to. Like, for as often as I compliment my mom for having great taste in music that introduced me to the likes of Billy Joel, Bruce Springsteen, Michael Jackson, all of that kind of stuff that we've talked about semi-recently, there have been an equal amount of things that maybe have not aged as well that I have specifically avoided mentioning up until now. And my first pick here is something that I feel like has certainly had a bit of cultural reevaluation. That a lot of it has to do with the baggage of this particular band, but this phase of them, I feel like, does have some kind of love, at least light, comparatively speaking. It grants me no pleasure to say this, and but one of the albums that was on permanent rotation in my mom's car, right up there with the other albums that I mentioned, is the first album from pop band Maroon 5. Now look. I hate Maroon 5. I need a point to be made here, is that past a certain point, I think that everything this band have made is unlistenable. And that's not an unpopular take. Most people hate Maroon 5. That's just kind of a thing that everyone agrees upon. And I do too. I'm boring. I'm sorry. But I gotta say, this is kind of a stand-in because I just have a certain level of nostalgia for a lot of the songs on Songs About Jane.
Hey, look, I thought that the general cultural consensus on that album was pretty positive.
I think it's certainly swayed a little bit back in its favor, but still, you go back and listen to this, and it's just like, I can't necessarily say that the things people dislike Maroon 5 for are not on this album, because they certainly are. There is an immensely unlikable presence at the source of all of it in the form of Atum Levine and his vocals, which I do not care for still. And the sense that all of these songs are about, you know, shallow relationships that are all about sex, and it's all this kind of whatever. But I gotta say, I have a particular fondness for the song Sunday Morning. I think that this is a perfectly enjoyable...
I love the Velvet Underground.
I mean, they definitely have the superior song, but I gotta say, I enjoy this in a lot of the ways that I enjoy a lot of similar kind of jazzy soft rock. There's a kind of funk inflected thing that this song has going on, and it's also one of the more likable songs that Atum Levine has penned in the past.
Jake, I will relieve your ego. I like this song too. I think a lot of people like this song. I think that if this is something that you find genuinely embarrassing to like, then my picks are gonna really
This is my first pick because it was easily the pick that I found to be the most agreeable, the least controversial, I think, but it still has an added stigma, I think, that just has to do with this band that I go back to Songs About Jane, and even some of the more popular beloved songs like This Love, for instance, not a fan of that. But like if you had this on shuffle in your car I'd have a good time with it. It's got a catchy chorus. It's got a nice hook. This is the best, other than the Kanye West song, Heard Him Say, this is the best utilization of Atum Levine's vocals that have ever been put to use. The only time where I think I've ever found his voice even remotely appealing. But yeah, this is just a nice piece of very agreeable kind of funk, contemporary R&B, alt rock that is from a bygone era. I feel like the early 2000s in terms of like rock that wasn't post grunge is just like really soft and really kind of fluffy and occasionally kind of embarrassing, which this most certainly is. But I don't know, there is just something nice and nostalgic about this song that I genuinely enjoy returning to. I've thought about making this a record club before, just because I do have an affinity for it in the same way that I have an affinity for Welcome to Diverse City. I think they're probably about as good as each other as albums, but
I had one of my
Ryley, do you think you could pull this song up?
Yeah, for sure. I can.
Undoubtedly I've heard it. But
you don't know it immediately? Wow. Okay. That's actually surprising. This song is so ingrained in my memory. I will just say, like, I had a girlfriend in high school, and her two favorite albums were Foster the People's Torches and Maroon 5's Songs About Jane. And so I had to listen to those, and I liked both of those albums.
2016.
It was 2014.
I haven't thought about Foster the People in so long.
It was 2014, actually, but yeah. That was just an era where I feel like, most people, if you were in high school between 2010 and 2015 and you had a high school girlfriend during that period, there was like an 80% chance that bitch loved Songs About Jane. And it was just, and so it's, you absorb it through osmosis. Let's remind ourselves very briefly of Sunday Morning.
Michael Bublé Boo ass shit I ever heard in my life.
Yeah. My mom also loves Michael Bublé. That makes sense.
Yeah, I mean, I like this song a lot.
That's part of it, I think, is yeah, all right, that's enough of this.
I promise you, my next two picks, far more embarrassing.
All right, well, Morgan, why don't you take your first turn now and tell us a little bit about your first pick?
I only picked two, so I'll start with the less embarrassing one. It shouldn't come as much of a surprise to anyone to hear that my picks are from the 2000s post-grunge wave. The first one is Seethers Broken, featuring Amy Lee of Evanescence.
Yeah, you've showed me this song.
I don't think I know this immediately. I'm going to get it up.
Oh, I'm so happy.
Was it in the Ben Affleck Daredevil movie? I know
It might have been in like the credits of that movie, maybe.
I mean, it already, just looking at it, it feels very Daredevil core in that era.
Yeah.
It's very Fallen core.
It wasn't the Punisher, though.
Yeah, that's right.
YouTube literally just doesn't want to play this song. I don't think I know this, unless it's the chorus. Yeah, I think I do know the chorus.
She just pops up like a little jump scare, like, whoop.
Okay, we don't need...
Look at this.
We do not need
Look at that fucker's face.
Do not need to listen to any more of Eddie Vedder at home.
That's rude to Scott Weiland, for one thing.
No, fair enough. That's a pretty cringy song. I didn't remember it until the broken part, but
I mean, it's just so 2000s post grunge. Everything about it is so overwrought, and the lyrics are I can't even get into the lyrics. Like,
I want to steal your pain away is a hilarious metaphor for trying to make someone feel better.
Written by an actual 8th grader, I think. And this man sings like he is passing kidney stones. I wanted you to know. And having him duet with Amy Lee, who sounds as great as she always has, is like, how do you not die of embarrassment? I mean,
he's
I'm
also
sure
like
the
his vocals
the
are so much
helped,
higher
but...
than hers too.
Yeah,
like they're in the background. How do you have Amy Lee on your song and you don't be like, pay attention to her?
She does have her own verse, which
Thank
is
God.
Pretty good. But like, part of this is nostalgia, undoubtedly. I think that guitar intro sounds great. Like, I think it's hard to get an acoustic guitar sound that shiny, I guess. Yeah, I know. Crying when I've already given him like 5 crusts. Just take and you take and you take.
Sufjan Stevens moment.
It's just so indicative of a certain time. And stop licking the pizza box of a certain time and the tastes of that time. And I don't know.
Coming into frame is so
good.
Hey, Jasper.
Yeah, it's just so ridiculous, and I so completely, without a trace of irony, love it, because it is also above everything nauseatingly sincere. Yeah, like there's not an ounce of forcedness or irony.
I think that makes a lot of music from that era not palatable, but it makes it easier to engage with, at least if you grew up with it, I think.
Yeah.
Well, okay, moving into my first pick then. And when I was writing my list, I put this first because it was like, instinctively, I feel like this is the least shameful. So I think it makes sense to start with this. But now thinking about U2 in particular, and just the general dynamic of,
not Bono.
But I have I have no shame or guilt about any of my U2 enjoyment. But
well,
you should. I know what you're going to say.
Yeah. Well, no, it's more that if there's certain parts of U2 that if you enjoy, I both understand, and also it's like I don't know about that, Chief. Like, the song "A Beautiful Day," for instance.
Yeah, look, I'm not gonna. There's no fun in me sitting here for 2 or 3 minutes trying to explain to you why it's this random deep cut on how to dismantle an atomic bomb is low-key fire. An album I haven't heard, by the way, but that's the idea. Is
I don't even think the Edge has heard that album.
It's not. It wouldn't make for very good content. Thing is, I know that you three will almost certainly know all 3 of my songs. And that's what makes this harder for me, is the judgment. So yeah, this first pick I put first because I thought it was the least embarrassing, but now I think it might be the most embarrassing in this particular context.
Oh, hell yeah.
Initially, it was the least embarrassing because it's kind of closer to the things that I enjoy because it's a 2010s pop song. And my other 2 picks aren't. So I was like, and I guess it's more understandable. It's a 2010s pop song. I like a lot of pop music. But thinking about it, yeah. Anyway, so I want you to think for a second. I want to see if you can get what it is before I even show it to you. What is the cringiest 2010s pop band, do you think? Or pop artist or whatever? I'll give you a hint and say, I'll give you a hint now and say it's not a solo artist. What do you think is the cringiest pop band of the 2010s?
I mean, it's without doubt Imagine Dragons. But
okay, this is not an Imagine Dragons song. That's a good counterpoint though.
Okay, specifically post Pretty Odd Panic at the Disco.
Okay. No, it's not as no, it's not that. It's a band that achieved a certain stratospheric heights, essentially, off the back of a few very successful and very huge singles that were particularly popular in, the young, early 20s Instagram demographic. And they're, whether you like the songs or not, and I think most people like us don't really, although there are some of these songs I think are guilty pleasures for a lot of people. The whole aesthetic of the band themselves, of the artists, is I think what turns people off a lot, because the artists are
is it 21 Pilots?
No, it's not 21 Pilots. I love that you haven't guessed it yet.
Damn it.
But the whole aesthetic of the artists, and it is 2 people essentially who are behind this project, is just so off-putting. Their entire personality has been consistently off-putting. Things they've said have been really, really kind of shallow. And
is it the Black Keys?
So no, it's not the Black Keys. Look,
shit.
I am going to share,
because everything you just said applies to the Black Keys.
I'm going to share the screen with you right now, and you can see for yourself what band I'm talking about.
All right. Oh my god.
Yeah, so I don't know how I'm going to edit this in the end, but for anyone at home who is listening,
we have our first truly painful entry.
My first pick today is Closer by the Chainsmokers. This song has been a guilty pleasure of mine ever since it was kind of first big, actually. I've just always really loved the synthesizer tone and synthesizer melody of this song. I've even even though the lyrics are like so Hot Topic bad, baby, pull me closer in the Range Rover of you
in the backseat of your Rover
that you stole from your roommate back in Dover or whatever. It's just really dumb.
Boulder,
lyrics.
Actually.
Anyway, let's have a listen.
Don't ask me how I know the lyrics.
I didn't say a word.
I fucking hate this man's face so much.
Made the dog cry.
The fucking intro, just the hey.
But I love this synth sound so much. I love how tight this is.
It's pretty good.
When the chorus hits, it's genuinely just fucking. It just feels really good.
Part of why this is tainted for me is that, have you seen the video of the singer doing this live? And he sounds legitimately tone deaf singing it. It's so funny.
I will say
he sings it and he's like,
I will say, to Halsey's credit as well, they're a great feature choice on this song, and I do like them as a singer more than I did as a teenager.
Oh yeah.
And they do add a particular, they sound better than the Chainsmokers guy anyway.
Oh yeah, I mean, the Chainsmokers themselves are the worst part of any Chainsmokers song. Halsey on this song is a breath of fresh air.
I just want to say that is maybe the single worst beat drop in the history of music.
It doesn't sound great coming through a YouTube rip shared through Zoom.
It didn't sound good in high-res lossless.
I was gonna say, like, I actually have, like, this is when I think of music that, like, when I had my first job in a Walgreens, I heard this music that sounds exactly like this from this particular year. Was like, even though it was like 3 years in the past at this point, this music played. I heard that song specifically every day for like a year. So I, like, when I associate like 2010s pop music, like I imagine this. I imagine the songs on Katy Perry's Prism. I imagine like every Future single that was popular in the early 2010s. Like all of those are just like in this metastasized cloud in my head that I associate with that time period. That's like, I hate it, but it's also weirdly nostalgic.
Yeah, well, like I don't know. You guys know me. I'm like an unashamedly like emo person who just like has tendencies towards cringe and some of the things.
Your enjoyment of M83, as a matter of fact, feels like it has a direct correlation.
Absolutely. I mean, if you actually sit down and read the lyrics to any M83 song, you will like, your eyes will dislodge from rolling so hard.
Yeah.
But it's just part of the appeal.
I like M83, just for the record.
No, and I know, I know you do, but like it's a sort of thing where like the cringiness of Closer, it doesn't bother me. Or at least it doesn't bother me as much as maybe it should, because I feel like there is a connection there between that and stuff that I grew up loving. And it just feels like it captures and distills down to this kind of like, no frills essence, what the feeling of that really larger than life synth pop music is. And
it's an honest cringe.
It is an honest cringe. It's certainly, the music video doesn't really do it any favors, and just the whole baggage of the Chainsmokers is just so eye-rolling. They're such fucking just cringe dudes who, are so fucking self-obsessed.
Hey, this song may not be amazing, but it's not selfie.
Well, that's certainly true. But anyway,
it is certainly best Chainsmokers song.
Well, if I'm gonna dig my own grave any further, I'll say I also kind of like Paris as well, but not as much as Closer.
It's because it's the same song.
That's true. It is the same song. Anyway, enough of that. Jake, what is your second pick today?
All right, I feel like this band and this song are so much more like my specific brand of cringe. Like, I feel like Chainsmokers being Ryley's pick and Seether being Morgan's, that's like very on brand cringe. And this is definitely mine. This is from a band that I don't hate this band. I think they've made some music that I like, but their direction of going in the more kind of alt electronic phase that they took their sound is just really garish and not really for me. And part of it is just because it is so like honestly full-bloodedly sincere in its overwhelming movie trailer IMAX levels of like dramatic cringe, and it's a very specific song. I'd be amazed if either of you or even really any of our listeners had even heard it, but it's a song from the band Bring Me the Horizon.
Oh no.
Yeah, this is the single that they released that I don't know why they made a song about this, but they made a song about the PlayStation video game Parasite Eve. That's what the song's called. It's called Parasite Eve.
Hard as fuck in concept, because I've heard this song. Yeah.
Okay.
And the execution is
yes
less promising than the title would imply.
It's a very good video game, for the record, but this basically is about the plot of the video game in broad strokes, and it is cringy in the same way that a lot of Bring Me Horizon's music is cringy, but it's specifically cringy for a particular moment in the first verse, which, like, it's going for this big, again, movie trailer IMAX epic scale, and in the first verse there's just this moment that is so full-bloodedly stupid. I laugh every single time I hear it. And it also just kind of goes hard. Like, I can't pretend that I don't think that this song is kind of like, it has a really, like, interesting structure to it. It goes pretty hard, but it's also just, oh god, I enjoy it in the same way that I enjoy something like Bring Me to Life by Evanescence, but this song isn't nearly as good as that one.
Let's have a wee listen, shall we? Because I definitely don't know this song.
You have to get to the part I'm getting. It's a very, you will know it when you hear it.
All right, let's go.
Wait for it. Wait.
What? Only pretending to feel something. I know you're dying to run. I wanna turn you.
Oh, get fucked.
Please remain calm. The end has arrived.
Oh my god.
Dig. What? What are we?
Wait for it.
This is a war. It's a parasite.
It's so bad. I love it. Fuck. Oh. It's so cringe. I love it.
I'll go ahead and say I don't think that your love of that is any more shameful than my enjoyment of the Second Law and Will of the People era Muse, respectively.
Yeah, it's about this. This is absolutely cringe in the same way that late era Muse is cringe. Better thing about this is that the obviously it's from like the plot of the games has to do with like a parasite and a viral infection, but something that made this even cringier was this came out in 2020 during the pandemic. So all of the lines about like not learning from the sickness or whatever the fuck, it's like, come on, guys.
Great pick. Definitely cringe as fuck. So that you've understood the assignment. But anyway, Morgan, your second pick first.
My idea for this particular topic came from this song, which is, I'll be completely honest, I have absolutely no sentimental attachment to, no nostalgia for it. I first heard it like a month ago, but it's something that I, instead of listening to it on Apple Music, I screen recorded the YouTube video of it and then MP3'd it so it would be out of my Scrabbles.
All right. I was going to say, you can go private.
That's me when I don't add an album in Apple Music to my library because I know it'll show up in my Scrabbles. So I just listen to it.
Fucking screen record it on YouTube. That's incredibly this must be some real shit.
But the thing is that I really think it is a really, really good song. And it's just so embarrassing because you might be underwhelmed, honestly, when I say what it is, but I have been railing against this band almost my entire life. So for so long.
This any number of bands, all of which are kind of flying through my head at the moment. I can't wait to hear what this is.
I don't even want to say it. It feels like a betrayal of everything that I hold true.
Oh, I'm so
in
excited.
This life. So I'm just gonna send it in the
Oh,
I
Okay.
knew you were gonna pick a Creed song. I fucking knew it in my heart of hearts that you were going
This
to
is-
pick a
yeah.
Creed song.
let's go.
Oh, they're doing the acoustic electric guitar combo thing that I love. I hate that.
Can you help me out? Can you lend me a hand? It's safe to say that
It's funny how like I think multiple
Sure.
Creed songs actually do sound pretty good until the moment Scott Stapp starts singing.
You would like Alter Bridge, Ryley.
Like I agree, the intro to this was great, and now the world's worst singer is I just hate his
Why does
voice
he
so
he
much.
actually looks like Colin Farrell in Daredevil.
I am deeply ashamed to say how many times I've listened to this song. I don't want to contemplate it.
Yeah, I mean, it definitely
Um,
looks bad on paper. You know, it's a pick from the Creed reunion album.
And that's part of it is I don't even know how I got here because I go back and I listen to like with our arms wide open, and I'm like, absolutely not, under no circumstance.
I mean, that late
then
90s,
it-
early 2000s production just it sinks Creed a lot lower than they already are.
Oh, I will say, you know, just to kind of, I hate Scott Stapp as a vocal presence, but I can't deny that I definitely see the vision with some of those big Creed songs. Like there is an emotion and a rise in songs like Higher that if they were just in different hands, I think would be something I could really connect with on that juvenile sort of
Like even Chad Kroger's hands. I'll even give
Yeah.
Chad that.
yeah.
Like
See,
it's a-
this to me
it's
sounds
cut
like a
above.
Jars of Clay song. You all familiar with Jars of Clay?
Oh
at all?
yeah.
That reminded me of like Flood, which is a legitimately very good song. I'm surprised I didn't
Yes.
have any like Christian rock radio picks for mine. I'll tap that well again some other time.
All right, so for my second pick, we're getting with my next two picks, we're definitely getting more into the territory of the sort of picks that Morgan and Jake, to a certain extent, have shouted out, but more so Morgan's lane. So I have no idea. I haven't really been able to get a measure of whether or not with these picks,
Mhm.
Morgan is pro or anti, and Jake, for that matter, both of you are pro or anti. I could see you. I could see you two both feeling similarly to me about this particular next song, you know, which is this really nostalgic connection. Equally, I could see it being like a Creed with arms wide open sort of situation where you just can't stand it for whatever reason. But you're definitely going to know that these next two songs.
Okay.
They're huge songs. They're very big, successful songs.
All right.
They're just like so out of my wheelhouse for me to enjoy. And a lot of my prep for this was going on like Spotify generated guilty pleasure playlists, and a lot of it was, you know, really cheesy 2000s rock music, and just like listening through, you know, dozens of songs, many of which I already knew, and just kind of establishing how I felt about them now. And I got particularly stuck on this song, both of the two songs I have left, but this song in particular, where I was like, fuck, this is better than I remembered it being. And so my second pick is Stains, It's Been a While.
Yes! Yes!
We got one.
Oh God.
Yeah, I figured you'd probably be pro it, but I can't. I can barely translate how well these particular songs are going to age.
In no context am I pro anything in regards to Stained. I just love the fact that this is a quintessential so bad it's good pick.
All right, well, let's have a wee listen to it first. Oh, I'm sorry.
Get your lighters out.
That intro gets in, and I'm just like, something within me.
This looks like the room that the Creed music video was in, just different lighting.
Yeah, it probably is.
I mean, this is really a situation like with Creed, where it's like, you know, literal human piece of shit here at the front of this band, and yet, why do I love this song?
He sounds a lot better here than he does in his solo music.
Oh no shit, yeah. It's been a while since this song was recorded.
Good one.
Oh, it's such a good chorus.
I can't
Remember.
It just was cooking when I listened to it, and I wasn't expecting.
Yeah. Hey, look, I mean, shitty Jar of Flies is still pretty good.
Yeah, I mean,
That,
I
again,
can't.
Literally, Jar of Flies at home. Like,
Yeah.
Everything I can remember.
All right, Jake. What is your third?
All right.
Day?
All right. Saved the best for last. I want to mention I was toiling between two different songs for my last pick here, but I went with one over the other because one of my picks was like, it was kind of the same thing as the Maroon 5 song, where I feel like this was like, you know, the epitome of like online music nerds think this is bad and terrible and have for a while, until it's like kind of gotten a little bit of a reevaluation as but that's the thing, is that the reason that I discarded it was just because it felt like too many people these days would just be like, oh no, I enjoy this song in a so bad it's good kind of way. And originally my pick on here was going to be very much in the same vein as what I think about the early 2010s pop music that I would hear when I was working at a drugstore. Originally my pick was going to be TikTok by Kesha. But
so also a song I would consider a guilty pleasure.
Yeah, the thing is that is so dedicated to a sense of in a very intentional brazen tastelessness that it feels wrong to pick. Like I couldn't say that just because in good conscience it's like I don't feel like that song fails at anything. Like it's doing exactly what it's trying to do.
Fun fact for you, TikTok by Kesha was the very last song I ever downloaded off of LimeWire.
That, oh god, that feels so accurate.
Because it came out around the time that LimeWire like really started tanking and going to shit and just being unusable. And it was the last song I downloaded off of that.
It's fun. I associate it with I associate it with another album that we reviewed on this show from around the same time, that being the songs from Tayo Cruz's Rockstar. Very same kind
era.
Of
it was early 2010, like right at the beginning of 2010.
I heard these songs like in a Starbucks back to back like a dozen times, I'm sure. So I had to go for a pick that was a bit more adventurous, a bit more embarrassing, and I actually referenced it earlier just because I like offhandedly. But I've mentioned in the past that I'm not necessarily willing to defend my stance that I enjoy some of this music, but I can't help but still enjoy it anyway. And that being, this is really just a stand-in for the whole album, which I could listen to and enjoy basically all of, despite all of its off-puttingness. And this is very much my Morgan Creed pick, where it feels like it goes against everything I stand for and everything that I hate. And it's from an artist who I've trashed on the show before. It's from Panic at the Disco's Death of a Bachelor, the song being easily the cringiest song on that album, which is Crazy Equals Genius. A nauseously terrible song. All across this album, all of the songs are just like they're so unlikable. But this motherfucker can write hooks. Like this album's not good, but I've listened to it all the way through like 3 or 4 times, and I can't help but enjoy a little bit of it. And this song in particular just feels like it embodies everything about Panic at the Disco these days that is cringy, that is terrible, that is unlikable on every front. And I like listening to it. This I love that vocal hook so much.
That's a really funny line, to be fair.
It is.
Oh, there's that completely just shut up. Way I can't stand it.
Worst Disney villain song of all time.
That's the whole album, is that it sounds like Yuri trying to make Disney villain songs, and he's not great at it, but there's something about it, man.
why whenever he does that way thing in a song, why does he always like double track it like 10 times?
I think it's because it's pure Queen worship, and not even like Queen that everyone likes. I'm talking about like hot space Queen. I'm talking about like magic Queen. Like this is easily some of the most indefensibly written music I think that I've consumed, of it just embodying that attitude of being like, oh, I'm so different. And yet I don't mind it here.
Look, I've been on the record as I really enjoy. I haven't listened to Beyond, so I've only listened to the first two, Panic at the Disco
Fever and Pretty Odd.
And I really like Pretty Odd. I think that is genuinely a really good.
It's solid.
I haven't listened in full to anything beyond that. But I appreciate this as a guilty pleasure pick because I do feel some semblance of guilt over the Panic at the Disco stuff that I do enjoy, like how I was mildly defensive of the first song on their new album. And that's a similar sort of energy.
And I'm that way for everything on Death of a Bachelor. I don't legitimately think there's a song on that album I actually dislike. As embarrassing as that is to admit, it's not a good album, but I don't know. There's something about the energy to it. Not the instrumentation isn't good, but like it sounds markedly like this kind of retro gaudy kind of Frank Sinatra pop punk pastiche. It's a sound that Panic, or at least that Brendan, wears better than most people would, I guess.
It's better than Parasite Eve.
That's true.
Okay, well, Morgan, you only had 2 picks, right? So I will go into my last pick now. This is simultaneously the song that I'm most embarrassed to like, but also probably the one of the 3 that I like the most. And again, it's from that same sort of whole aesthetic of Stained and whatever, at least to me, it all melds together. Someone who's more into that, late 90s, early 2000s music might have a little bit more nuance in how they distinguish these bands. But to me, this is all the same sort of thing. And so again, I have no framework on whether this is something that you two would like or hate. It's, again, definitely a song you'll know because it's huge.
Oh.
It was it's a big staple of rock radio, and I just adore it. And the song is Hoobastank's The Reason.
Fuck yeah.
Yeah. Oh, absolutely.
Again, it's like it reminds me so much of the shittiest context in which I've been made to listen to radio rock. But again, like this kind of freedom of choosing to listen to it of your own volition and having that nostalgia come through. Look, let's just indulge ourselves for a minute. God, I just like I love this so I'm so fucked up.
This, Ryley, I feel like another pick I should have gone for would be a song I enjoy exactly like this, which is Chasing Cars by Snow Patrol.
Yeah, I think that's
same energy.
There's less guilty pleasure there, I think, because people love that song in a very nostalgic way. Whereas this, I think, is still a little bit cringe to like.
I love how Hoobastank have more followers on YouTube than fucking Stained does.
I have to say, as someone who low-key loves the Callings, Wherever You Will Go, co-sign.
It's just like they haven't come in yet, but it's just like the wailing guitar leads and just the way
it's good.
Intensifies and stuff. It really feels very like the kind of the stuff I love most about this kind of music. When it really leans into the melodramatic aspects. I love that shit.
Yeah, this is another tentative 3-star pick for me that I would say I'd go on a limb to say that I just narrowly like that song.
I mean, I would probably give it like a solid 4.5 and just lean fully into how much I love it as for what it is. It's what
love.
And I love it. And that is the spirit of this. So at home, let us know what you think of these picks. What are the songs that you're kind of low-key?
We embarrassed ourselves in front of you. It's your turn now.
Let us know in the comments below what songs you would pick for this exercise as well. And whether you enjoyed this sort of kind of group therapy session of each of us kind of confessing some of our, most dark hidden secrets.
And hey, if you enjoyed it, we can do this again. There's plenty of cringe in my back catalog that I'm more than willing to drum up for content.
Yeah, I mean, doing these now episodes every week, inevitably we're going to end up revisiting certain topics down the road. So I'm sure we will. And so let us know what you think and what your picks would be. Thank you for sticking with us for this episode of Jams and Tea Now this week. Again, as we've mentioned multiple times, we'll be back in just a couple of days to review the new albums from Paranormal and Lil Yachty, so stick around for that. If you enjoyed this episode, please consider giving it a like and subscribing to the channel if you have not already. Both those things help us out a lot. If you want to go above and beyond and support the channel even further, you can hit the join button. And for just $1 a month, you can become a Jams and Tea family member and get your name in the title call of every video on this channel. Plus, if you want to recommend us some music to listen to, your recommendation will go to the top of the pile. Until next time, though, folks, rock over London, rock on Chicago, Disneyland, the happiest place on earth.